Brenn in Canada has an interesting question about being a non-HP. Okay. Brenn.
Hey, love the show. My question is, I'm not a very sensitive person in terms of, like, I'm not usually offended by opinions, beliefs, all that sort of stuff. But I realize that people in my family are, especially my brother, who is has become radicalized on the Ben Shapiro right-wing kind of narrative. So when I ask him about, why he thinks a certain belief or whatever it is, he tends to become sensitive and sort of recoil from the conversation. And I was wondering if you guys have any good strategies in terms of how you can talk to someone who is a highly sensitive person you care about and want them to think more about their beliefs. Sorry, my cat is meowing.
I heard
never
that. I was like,
apologize for a cat.
Yeah, never. So that is, a little bit tricky, but also probably the conversation itself is overstimulating them.
Mm-hmm.
Can you?
Yeah, I think that, well, just being aware of the environment. I don't know how functional like an HSP mindset or using that distinction here really operates. Sorry, I'm being a little unclear. When you're talking to your family member and you're having a hard time having that conversation and they're getting a little bit worked up or whatever else, knowing whether or not they're a highly sensitive person doesn't necessarily help to separate people into two groups here. I think the only place that HSP label would be relevant is if you're trying to have this conversation like in the parking lot as you're walking to the car, as there is like bright sun and there is a lot of moving parts and there are people everywhere, and or trying to have a conversation about politics while the radio is on or there's a TV in the background. Like, just being cognizant of the environment can be really helpful, and that's true really of anybody, because again, when we're talking about a highly sensitive person, we're talking about a person who's just highly sensitive. We all are sensitive. We all have these sensitivities, these senses, and we perceive the world, we perceive information coming in. Somebody who's highly sensitive is maybe going to be more easily overwhelmed by having a bunch of background noise, a bunch of bright lights, a bunch of uncomfortable environmental circumstances. But that's a good thing to be aware of when you're talking to anybody in a topic or a conversation that might be a little bit uncomfortable.
I understand. In my experience, though, it has been more in terms of not the sensory perception he has, in terms of the sensitivities to his, I don't know if psyche is the right word, but the sensitivities to his identity and his beliefs and stuff like that. He tends to recoil and shut down instead of discussing them. And obviously, you have to respect someone who doesn't want to have a conversation. But when he initiates the conversation and it doesn't necessarily go kind of with the narrative of his thoughts and beliefs, how can you navigate that so that you don't upset a person? Because when people get upset, they tend to shut down and clam up. I was wondering if there's any strategies or if I'm just, I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. The therapist and maybe the human in me is kind of hearing that, like, these ideas around strategy, and is wondering if maybe you're getting the feedback that you need. If they don't want to hear from you, maybe they just don't want to hear from you. And that's okay. Like, I recognize the desire to tilt at windmills and to, help radicalize the world for your worldview. But I think that if somebody is just being pretty clear that they are getting overwhelmed by these conversations, or that they're angry about what you have to say, sure, you might be able to say it a little bit more gently, a little bit softer, a little bit more whatever. But maybe it's time to just accept that they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And I would agree with you, except for the fact that he initiates the conversations. It's not like I'm trying to talk to someone who doesn't want to have a conversation. He'll start the conversation, but then if I bring up points that are sort of contrary to his worldview, that's more what I'm talking about. I don't want to have conversations with people who don't want to have conversations.
Sure.
Right. Well, I think that I think that this is more of a political thing than anything else. Like I know people all across all different kinds of spectrums who, if you question their beliefs or their political leanings, they will shut down, or they will get aggressive, or they will overreact. I don't think that this is necessarily something that is unique to any group of people. And so probably not treating this as a, oh, well, you're just a highly sensitive person, so I'm going to talk with you differently. But instead, maybe think about doing some street epistemology. Do you watch Anthony Magnabosco's channel ever?
I do. He's so much better than I could hope to be at.
Well, I mean, you can certainly, practice, and maybe don't practice with this person who is, maybe a little bit more heightened in their emotional responses. But yeah, I think treating this less as a, this person has this particular trait, therefore I need to address them in this way, and more of a, hey, how do we have good political conversations in a very emotionally driven climate where everything is overblown anyway? Like, I don't identify as HSP. I also will get very aggressive during a political conversation if someone is wrong, right? I'll like reach out, like, why? Like, you're wrong here. So like, this isn't something that is, I wouldn't say dependent on this particular trait. So if you do want to have a conversation about how to talk with people, that's certainly a conversation we can have another time. But I think that we should probably move on, because I know we have a couple more questions for Courtney before the show ends.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your insight, guys.
For sure. Thanks for calling in, Brenn.